Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to this is a very special edition of Sports Wrap. We are very lucky. I've been trying hard to get the one and only Jim Derochea back into our show from Stoughton. And by the way, I'm Mike Wigdor. I'm one of the co-hosts, along with my friend and co-host Frank Walsh. And we're here to talk to Jim. Last time he was on, he talked to us about the consumer complaint he filed to get the first and fourth draft picks back for the Patriots. So we're very excited to have him back on the show so we can get an update from Jim and see what's happening now and where it's going to be going in the future. So Jim, the stage is yours, my friend.
Hi, Jim. Welcome aboard again.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Great to see you guys again. I think last time I was here, we had under 1,000 signatures in the petition or something like that. We're just under 7,000 at the moment. We were rising pretty fast until the hearing a couple weeks ago. It's kind of slowed down, and I think the rhetoric we're hearing is people are just a little tentative. They're thinking maybe Brady could lose this thing. And I think there's been a couple recent developments in the last couple days that hopefully will re-spark things and get it rolling. And then hopefully we're hoping in the next week to hear from the Attorney General as well on the consumer complaint itself. So.
Yes. So she hasn't responded at all to anything. But I'm thinking right now there's like 7,000, almost 7,000 emails in her box because in her mailing, I shouldn't say, I don't want to say it the right way, in her email folder waiting for people to respond. And each time someone does it, it creates a whole new email. So what's holding her up? And is she just, I guess she is waiting for someone who has real authority to call and say, hey, are we going to act on this or not?
Yeah, I think it was maybe a little over 2 weeks ago I called and I got on administrative and all they said, they took a moment, came back and said it's still being looked at. There's no determination. So at least that wasn't bad news because the worst thing would have been, oh, sorry, that's it's been denied. So at least I know it's in a queue somewhere, or maybe has been looked at, but it hasn't been disregarded totally.
Okay, that's good news.
I think we have new viewers all the time, so I think it might help a little bit to inform the viewers about what we were talking about the verdict and the ruling a couple of weeks ago. And folks, what we're talking about is that Brady went to New York for that appeal, and he met before the appeal judges, and there's a lot of people who walked away from there shaking their heads saying that it didn't go very well. So there are some doubters out there thinking that Brady may lose his appeal.
There is, but I think...
What's your take on that? We talked at length about that a week or so ago. What's your take on that?
I found it interesting, the line of questioning, as they went after details that are usually in the level before, where Judge Berman, or even before that, before an arbitrator, which happened to be Goodell, those things would be hashed out. And the fact that their charge was to look at Judge Berman's ruling and to see if it was legally sound, which made it really odd that they took that tact. So the one thing I took away was, as bad as it seemed based on all the reports and reading the transcripts, that if they stick to the letter of what they were charged with, there's still a better than 50-50 shot that Brady comes out of this and it's upheld. His side, the NFLPA, wins. But it's still, I'd like to be a fly on the wall to know what the motivation was behind the questioning, because it didn't go with the tenor of what the hearing was supposed to be about.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, what do you think about when they, like other columnists and reporters have printed out or have written that the NFL lawyer actually supposedly might have lied about some of the statements that he made to the judges, and that he didn't give the whole story about that, and they actually have it out in print in journals? Do you think that's could influence the judges? Will the judges look at that, and will they respond to that?
I think technically they're supposed to block themselves from that kind of noise, but it seemed like from what they came in their questioning that they were listening to some noise, because that was the tenor of their questioning. So I would think in that if they are human and they hear this, they have all the documentation in front of them. Then they've seen those articles, and they have to know that what was coming out or what was presented in front of them was not exactly factual. Was
evidence.
Yeah, it was.
So cold.
I wouldn't say come out and call it a lie, but I'd say it was not exactly the true portrait of what or characterization of what Brady said or what had already been agreed in the level before with Judge Berman.
Okay. Now, the petition that you have started and has since, as you said, grown to 7,000 people. You have gained a lot of traction for some pretty prominent people, and I know Mike and I gave a little bit of an update that some of the impetus that has happened along the way. Why don't you talk a little bit about some of the people whom have picked up on your cause, and where do you think that it's going to go now that it has gained the traction that it has?
Sure. We would still love to get into the mainstream media.
Well, you're pretty close to it.
Yeah,
you're pretty close to it.
Wait, are you listening, Jerry Thornton?
You're pretty close to it.
Jerry
So talk
Thornton,
about some of the big names.
But actually, Jerry Thornton has been very supportive, especially outside of like behind the scenes, either texting or email. He had written an article, I think came out either right around the time I was here before or shortly thereafter, that was very supportive. So he's been sort of carrying the torch that way. There's been a few other, you two included.
Thank you.
And
we put you on the map.
We have a couple of the signees were big WWE wrestlers. So I don't know how we attracted that crowd, but John Cena and Triple H, both which have ties to New England, have signed the petition. So I've tweeted out numerous times tagging them to thank them for their support, hoping that some of their supporters kind of catch on and get that wave going as well.
And you have a prominent attorney as well, whom you are in contact with on a regular basis.
Yes, he's actually been very helpful. He's very neutral, but he's been a very guiding force. Michael McCann from Sports Illustrated. Because I'll bounce things off him as articles come out. If I see that this would either hurt or be a bump, something good for my complaint, then I'll bounce it off him and see from a legal standpoint if he thinks it has the same angle that I foresee. And he's been great giving us feedback, and he's done some behind the scenes digging too to try to get some feedback for us.
And you've also heard from someone in the craft group, I've heard, which could be the biggest impetus, really, to get this going.
I will say this right out, if nothing ever happens beyond where we are right now with this consumer complaint petition, the validation I got on that phone call, and basically was, I was wrapping up, I think about 3 weeks ago, work, packing up, and my cell phone is buzzing. I look and it's Foxborough number, and I said, it couldn't be.
Yeah, right.
And it happened to be a very close friend of Robert Kraft, who said he was calling on behalf of Mr. Kraft, expressed his appreciation and his admiration for the lengths that I was going in filing the complaint. And this had come on the heels of about a week before I'd sent an email to Robert Kraft's office, basically laying out what I was doing and why I was doing it. And to recap, I felt like his hands were tied because of the ownership agreement, and as a fan, this is a step I could take on behalf of all fans. So the whole call, and I actually ended the email with, if this in any way harms or would shed a bad light on the Patriots organization, just let me know and I will cease and desist.
Right.
So the whole call, through the admiration and the appreciation, I was waiting for the but, and it never came. And it actually ended with, on a good note, saying hopefully in a couple months we both have the outcome that we're looking for. So I guess I walked away from that call knowing that Robert Kraft and the organization was in full support of what we were trying to do, and appreciation as a fan base what we were trying to do. So it definitely validated the path that we're on.
Yeah,
Now,
that's good.
just as a point of information, we are picked up on demand, and we have viewers all over the country and in some cases all over the world who can watch us. Just for information's sake, Jerry Thornton is a sports personality who does a radio show on WEEI.
Right.
And in addition to being one of the foremost authorities on the Patriots and a diehard Patriots fan, he's also a very local comedian, so he has
Yes.
very wide reach, and he has a very, very large following. So I just wanted to say that for
Yeah, he's on
the
the
people
Dale-
out there who may
Right.
not know who Jerry Thornton is.
Right. Well, he's also on the Dale and Holly midday show. So
Yep.
I mean, and most people, if you're a sports enthusiast, you're going to be watching either Dale and Holly or you're going to be watching Felger and Maz. And Jerry Thornton is a big player on that, a big contributor on that show. So he has a lot of clout, and we certainly would like to use his clout to help us get this message out. The other thing I think that might be helpful to them, just reading in the last couple of days, is that the NFLPA and the NFL are discussing possibly a settlement possibility, not only on the Brady case, but the Peterson case, which could end up, I don't know, maybe resolving it. I don't know exactly if that would include the draft picks, but we certainly would like to think that it might. What's your feeling about that situation?
Yeah, when those came out, within 2 days, first the article came out 2 days ago, discussing how the NFLPA and NFL were discussing stripping Commissioner Goodell of a lot of his disciplinary powers, and then the
Right.
next day that was followed up by the negotiations that are supposedly going on or are going to continue next week at the owners' meetings in Florida,
Right.
talking about basically almost whitewashing it, depending on what article you read, but the Peterson case and the Brady case. My gut feeling initially was that if that happens in the Brady case, that perhaps there might be something tied to it that says, sure, Tom Brady will wash our hands, but an agreement or a compromise that Robert Kraft can't go after the draft picks. I'd actually talked behind the scenes to Sports Illustrated's Mike McCann about that. He agreed. He thought that might be something that could possibly be tied to it. So, which again, and he was in agreement that would make the consumer complaint that much more relevant, because it would be at that point
That's true.
the only path to returning or rescinding any penalties, including the draft picks.
I think that would definitely give you a lot more momentum, because people would be so upset if it was just the Brady situation is resolved, but not these draft picks are sitting out there. And we could see how important it is, because just recently, I mean, they traded Chandler Jones, and in order to get a second round draft pick, which is like I think 60 or 61, and he was a good player, but I mean, they need to get somehow into that, as close as they can be to the top players in the league, to actually have a chance to. We talked about this last week. If you pick a first round draft pick, Frank said this, and I agree with him 100%. It could impact your team for 10 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a killer to lose a draft pick.
It definitely is. I mean, you go back in recent history, they're basically I think it was 7 of the last 8 first-round picks are still starters. Well, now that Jones is gone, but he's technically at the time still a starting player on the team. So they are definitely impactful. Are they Hall of Famers? When they're picking 22 to 29, not necessarily, but they're contributors for, like you said, 6, 8, 10 years down the road, as long as you can hang on to them. And
Right, they're pieces of a puzzle that helps you make a championship team.
Exactly.
Potentially.
Exactly. So, the other thing too is with the draft picks, and I talked about this last time I was on, that Belichick has a habit of packaging draft picks. Fortunately, this is a very deep draft, or unfortunately, if they don't have that first round pick. But fortunately,
Right.
where they just got 4 additional picks as compensation, and they just traded for the second round pick. So it is a deep draft. But historically, he's taken drafts that aren't as deep and traded down in for multiple picks. Trade a second for a third and 2 fourths, and he's always found value there. So they're assets. This year, I think that first round pick, as much as any year, would be very valuable because of how deep that draft is.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, as far as your petition, before we get too lost for time, how can people find you and how can people go out there and support you, support your cause, and sign up for your petition? How can they do that?
There's a couple different ways. One on Twitter, they can find me at Jim Derochea. And I know the spelling might be a little difficult, so I started...
We'll have it up there on the screen. Hopefully
right.
people will write it down.
Yep.
I also started a clone Twitter account called @Defenders OTW, or Defenders of the Wall. So they both, I tweet out the same stuff at the same time. It's sort of a clone account. So either one and both have a link to the petition, or viewers can simply go to change.org, and there's a search tool, and search Patriots draft picks, and it'll in the title it'll say about restoring the first and fourth picks. So that's also an easy way to get there. Just change.org is it's a very common site, and it's every time I've done the search, it's been the top one that popped up. So.
Nice.
And you have Defend the Wall, which is another group that was started for Patriots fans particularly. Must emphasize that. It's not a complaining site or a hater site or whatever you want to feel about it. It's a strong Patriot fan site. You can talk about that a little?
Sure. Shortly after I started the petition, there was a gentleman.
There's your Twitter handle right there.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you. Nate King, he's out in California, but he's a huge Patriots fan. And he wanted to partner with me to help get some activities going to help. He was very appreciative that someone had actually taken action, and it sort of emboldened him to want to do the same thing. So one of the things we eventually came up with was this group, Defenders of the Wall, on Facebook. And there's many Patriot sites out there, and they're great, and they dispense news. But we wanted to be unique in that I told him I would do this if we have sort of a call, and our calling is action. So we've got this group, and within a week or so, we've got over 700 members, and we're all about taking action. We put ideas out there, and then we get volunteers. Right now, in the next day or so, we're sending a letter to each and every owner, sort of highlighting what's happened, why it's wrong, why we feel it's wrong, and why we would like them to support the overturning of the penalties, based on, and there's many references to the numerous articles that have come out from scientific to the sports world, like a Peter King.
Right.
And in hopes that it's sort of like politicking, a lobbyist. If there's a couple owners on the fence, maybe we can give them a couple tidbits to convince them to take action, especially now where next week they're supposedly going to be talking about a different structure and possibly doing something about the Brady and the Adrian Peterson cases. So get the bug in their ear now before they go in and maybe turn one or two.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know if we had mentioned this before, but are you familiar with the group Free Tom Brady?
Yes. Yep.
Are you connected with them at all?
A couple of our sort of high activity members are directly. They've either been part of them or
Michael Brooks and Jeff Sullivan?
I don't know any of them.
Okay, we've had them on our show,
Yeah.
and actually they introduced that site
That's true.
on our show here, so that might be something that you might want to take a look at, because
Sure. Yeah.
how many followers they have, Mikey? They're up to into
They've
the
several
thousands and
thousand.
thousands and thousands.
They do.
So if you could maybe hook up with them and connect with them,
Yeah,
you know, and
we look at this
piggyback on that.
This is a transition from it started as Free Brady
Correct.
to basically, free the penalties, free the draft picks,
That's
Correct.
right. Yeah.
including Tom Brady's penalty.
So let me ask you, what do you think about the trade? Because that's also very topical news, and we are winding down a little bit. What do you think about the Chandler Jones trade, and what do you think about their getting Chris Long and what they did get for Chandler?
I loved Chandler Jones as a player. I kind of had a sentimental affection towards him because 2 months before the draft, when I found out he was John Bones Jones' brother, and I said, geez, the athleticism in the family, and I was telling people, that's a guy I'd like to get. They ended up trading up and getting him, kind of made me look like a guru, and it was totally coincidental. So I kind of had
You had Belichick's ear, maybe?
Yeah. So I had that sort of affinity to him. So it's tough, to see him move on. I honestly don't think with who they have to sign in the next year or so that he was probably at the tail end of that, and he may not have signed. So to get some value, first of all, second round pick, nobody gets better value out of his picks than Belichick. That's great.
Yeah.
The guard that they got is a former number 1, 7th overall pick, I think 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Still has an upside. I guess he has never lived up totally to that potential, but he's never also worked under Dante Scarnecchia.
Plus he's been injured quite a bit as well.
So staying healthy, and obviously we know from that Denver game that is the biggest glaring hole on the team.
That's right.
So, and Chris Long, I think he's a little longer in the tooth, if you will, than Chandler.
He just hit 30, 31?
Yeah.
But
he's a seasoned veteran. I like what he brings to the game. And again, you look at the bloodline, Howie Long, Hall of Famer, great player, and
he's a Bostonian in a way. He played at Melrose High, and I also was listening on the way in, and he was one of the first people that was defending Brady when the Deflategate thing came on.
Yes,
it hit the fan, and that was amazing.
He was one of the few. Actually, and I posted that to our Defenders of the Wall Facebook last night when I saw that, and I saw the date was literally within a week. It was before the Super Bowl and after the AFC Championship game, and he just basically came out, and what he said then rings true today, even though other facts have come out scientifically that weren't available then.
Yeah.
And he basically was very, has a lot of admiration for Belichick and the Patriots organization and how they do things. And so it's apropos that he's now a Patriot, a year later. So
yeah, people were saying that may not be any coincidence at all.
No, it might not be, but it is. He was the salmon swimming upstream end of last January when that article was put out there, and it was written by him, from a player's view, and it was. If you haven't seen it,
I haven't read it, but they just said some tidbits of what they said about it.
Yeah.
I think we would be remiss if we didn't bring up one of your other favorite sports while we have a few minutes left.
That's true.
There's some team out there, I think they're called the Red Sox,
Here we go.
who have totally flown under the radar because everything is all Patriots all the time.
That's true.
And what's your take on the Red Sox this year?
Well, first, I think they like flying under the radar.
The way they are now.
The last 4 years they finished, and with the Hanley situation and the Panda situation. So
and the manager
and the
situation with his little dalliance.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what we spent about 20 minutes talking about last week.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
It's things are. I like the way prices looked. Joe Kelly's looked phenomenal.
Yes.
Porcello still hasn't found it, but I'm hoping he finds it sooner than later, so he can look more like he did the last 8 to 10 starts at the end of last year.
Yep.
If the starting rotation can pitch up to 90% of expectations, and excluding Price, and Price can be 95 to 100%, they're going to be in great shape because their bullpen should be very strong. With Kimbrel.
What do you think about the controversy though now with Sandoval? With him, like they said, the earlies today. I mean, we're on Wednesday. We're very topical today, folks. Sometimes we're way behind, but today we're very topical because I heard on the midday show, one of the shows, that Sandoval is so big that he can't get down and get ground balls, and they were saying maybe Travis Shaw should be the third baseman now.
Yeah, I think by the eye test. I don't think there's too many experts either on the team or out there as fans that would say Travis Shaw is the starter opening day over Sandoval. But the reality is the money they're paying him and everything else, that it's going to be the other way around. I think, he's been a professional hitter most of his career, last year notwithstanding. So I think they want to give him every shot to prove that the weight isn't going to prohibit him from being that player again, but it might be a short leash. And Travis Shaw has done nothing but impress since last year, since they put him in the lineup. And they would put him, he'd sit down for 10 days and he'd get in the lineup and he would just produce. And
what do you hit? He had 13 home runs. I think that, if you amortized his numbers for the whole year, he would have been off the charts. He would have had, 50 home runs and 100 and something RBIs, for the number of games that he played.
Yeah, he was really clicking. He was really hitting. Let me ask you this other thing, though, because I'm really curious about, having been, both of you guys were really into baseball. What do you think about the new rule change with second base, where you can't go, hard into second base?
My take on it, last year I thought was a bombshell waiting to happen, that some major player, like a catcher, they took away the collision, but was going to, because those guys were so scrutinized that they're turning a double play, and usually it's that location thing, they get out of the way. Well, now they're going back to replay and saying, oh, well, his foot left the base a fraction of a second before he caught it, and so those guys had to hang in there longer. And this rule kind of puts it back, it's into perspective, and saying it forces the runners to be safety first, and it allows the fielder, more importantly, that safety net of knowing that, one, that guy's not going to slide right at my feet. He's going to start his slide early. He's going to slide at the base. He's going to have to touch the base. He's not going to slide past the base and roll me over.
Right.
So it gives them a little cushion, which they need, because otherwise it was just a matter of time before we had some disasters with some major, stars in the middle infield.
Right.
The way things were going. So I don't mind it. I think it'll take a little bit of adjusting, because it is kind of part of the game. Break up the double play. Well,
That's right.
There's still ways of breaking up the double play without being over aggressive to the nature that we saw last year, that caused most of the controversy in the playoffs. The slide that took the shortstop from the Mets out of the playoffs, basically. So.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think you put it very, very well. Safety first. I think that, just like in football and in the other sports, they're leaning to safety. They're erring on the side of caution, and I'll give them credit for being a little more proactive. Of course, it happened during the World Series, but I think that now that they put it in, they took action right away. They took a stance, and hopefully that'll continue when they can be proactive. And next time, maybe they'll put something in before somebody gets hurt.
I know. Yeah, exactly, to prevent it. But boy, we're really running down on time. I guess we should have to thank Jeff Pickett for being our director today and filling in. Nice job, Jeff.
Not as good looking as Roxanne, but certainly as able and capable.
That's right. And we actually have to thank M&G Pizzas, does a fabulous job. Once again, bringing us great pizzas to get the show rolling. And go down and visit them in Stoughton Center and tell them that that Sports Rap.
Yeah, tell them that you came from Sports Rap, and don't forget to duck. Jim, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks a lot, Jim.
Mike,
we really appreciate it.
So we have to say,
Michael Wigdor, Jim Derochea, Frank Walsh, we will see you down the road.